This episode is brought to you by D's Nuts. Use code BANGINBOYS to get 20% off your next purchase.
No mercy. No mercy.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Bangin' Boys, and my name is Aditya Dakota, and I'm joined by
Ryan Drahan.
Josh Drahan.
Jaden Lee.
Yeah, so this week we're starting with a piece of literature by Margaret Atwood called "There Was Once."
It's a very controversial piece, and there's many opinions from many people about this piece and this satire. We're going to discuss about it.
So I guess like we usually do, it's our 137th episode, so I mean, you day-to-day viewers should know how this goes. I'm going to start with a question, going to go down the line, they're going to answer it, and we'll just do a little rotation. So my question for you all, it's just very simple. What were your thoughts on the piece of literature?
All right, I guess I'll start us off.
No mercy.
I think There Was Once is a very well-wrote satire on society in general, and how we have come to a point where political correctness has become a prominent issue in society, and everybody's got their own opinions about political correctness, but the author is taking a bash at political correctness and how many people try to go to an extreme of trying not to offend anyone at all, and that often strips so many qualities that we should be proud of in people. Instead, we're trying to just make everything bland, the same old, like 1984 with the Orwellian dystopian society. Everything is dumbed down so that nobody is different, and there's this sense of unity in being bland and just average.
Okay, so one thing that I found interesting about this piece is you can view it in two different ways that I saw. Was that you could see it as two people having a conversation. So the two different viewpoints of one person correcting this person in this, trying to tell their story on every little minor detail. Or you can see it as somebody having an internal conversation with themselves and critiquing themselves and their own thoughts in the story by changing and saying nothing that they are saying is correct, and they're changing it as they go.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Josh. So the start of the story, the story talks about changing the forest to more of a modernization to urban environment, and then they challenged the word poor and discussed how having a house does not mean poor, and changing that to middle class. So they start to change a little bit, following the political correctness. But then afterwards they talk about changing beautiful to overweight, and having racial identities show up, and all these too much political correctness ruins the entire story. So I thought a little bit of political correctness might be all right, but the excessive amount, it ruins the entire story and our society.
Well said, Jaden. I'd go along those lines. I really enjoyed how the story kind of shows an exaggeration of political correctness and how it ruins the story. You get the first line, and that's once upon a time there was a poor girl. That's about as far as you go. She starts breaking down that first sentence, and you end up with "there once was," and that's all you have for the story. There's not a lot of context. You get no setting. It basically ruins the creativity of a writer. So I feel like she's pointing out that you are going to offend some people in the process of creation, in the process of writing, in the process of literature, and that's a good thing. There needs to be offensive comments, but there doesn't need to be overly offensive comments. And so there is that middle ground where there is some sort of offense, but not overly offensive. And that's what I liked about the piece. wasn't so much to create a story, but more to, I guess, display a message.
Well said. So there was once talks a lot about political correctness, and we talked about that a little bit already. But in today's political correctness climate, how do you guys think it is shown through current events or recent policies that are being passed?
So one place I see it is with the race issue and the use of slurs. So now these days we aren't using those slurs more. We're not using those slurs, and that used to be socially acceptable to like address these people by these slurs, and now we're kind of transitioning into a world where we're starting to treat these people as they deserve to be treated, and as equals, and as we're starting to include them into society in a lot better ways. So that's kind of where I see the change.
Yeah, where I see a little bit of the political correctness movement is in the movie and the film industry. So, for example, like recently, a lot of African Americans and Asian Americans or Hispanics have shown up in these movies, like Hollywood movies and stuff like that. Like I think it was a couple years ago, or like Black Panther, their like main cast were all African Americans. So all those changes are positive because like we can see all the diverse ideas and like the demographics. So it's something that's fresh and something like to be proud about. But sometimes like any kind of movie that contains like offensive elements to certain demographics, some of those get banned or like shut down because some people like boycott it and they don't have even access to any of those movies. So that kind of blocks like the communication and understanding what political correctness is. And
Yeah, where I see political correctness in action is on Twitter. So recently, Elon Musk bought Twitter for X amount of dollars. He's trying to, I guess, fix the freedom of speech element on the app. And what I've witnessed is, first of all, a lot of hate being thrown on the platform because users will attack other users for their orientation, their race, their the way they look, which is, first of all, not fostering an environment of love or appreciation. So I feel like the political correctness in action is showing, like, pushing towards an environment where there needs to be more love towards your neighbor. Secondly, I feel like the political correctness in a negative aspect is polarizing politics. So we see, it's quite easy to view on an app like Twitter, the Republican Party going after the Democratic Party and vice versa, using, like, pointing out, 30 years ago, blank said a racial slur, and now in today's culture that's not acceptable, and he or she should be, I guess, taken out of his position of power because of something he said 30 years ago. So I think there is negative and positive aspects to the political correctness. It's, I guess, for like the long-term outcome of being politically correct in a forum will, I guess, diminish the amount of hate that's thrown on a random American, random citizen, a random person in the world. But the negative aspect of it is that it's polarizing the way that we communicate through politics. It's making us censor ourselves in, I guess, too outward of a way. So I feel like we're watching our words too much, and we're scared to offend people because you'll lose your position. So that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, all of these are really great points, and there's much more to political correctness than what we've talked about. But in a general sense, political correctness has pros and cons. For a lot of people, it allows them to like raise their voice about certain issues that might not have been talked about before. There are many people who were often minorities who had their voices suppressed, and now political correctness allows them to speak up and talk about the injustices they've faced over the years, and that pushes us toward progress. But in a way, political correctness with cancel culture, as Ryan pointed out, diminishes the progress that can be made because it fails to recognize, especially cancel culture, fails to recognize that people can change, and what they said 30 years ago is not the same. Whoever said something 30 years ago is not the same person as they are today, and that shouldn't be held against what they said. Of course, if they got recurring like hateful speech towards certain groups or certain persons, they should be reprimanded. But to put someone down for what they've done 30 years ago, and at a time when, especially when they're younger and they haven't matured as much, it feels like it's an injustice to them.
So in this story, there's evidence that there's a lot of evidence that political correctness changes words significantly. So what do you guys think of political correctness affecting the language choices of everyone?
So I guess I'll take a new approach on this question. So my man Kendrick Lamar, he just dropped his new LP, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, and the track 6 on disc 2 is called Anti-Diaries, and it's talking about how he has a transgender aunt, and later on he has a transgender cousin, and how he as a child didn't really have to deal with, he got introduced to this idea of, I guess, the LGBTQ community early on in his life, so now he isn't really struggling with that, I guess, transition. And I guess some of the word choices he used on the song, he uses the F slur as a point of reference that like, this isn't a word you should be saying. And when you listen to the song, it's very powerful. One of the there's a dialogue in it about Christmas Mass and how he was sitting next to his cousin, how he was more religious than Kendrick was, the transgender cousin, and how in the pastor's eye, just based off religious stereotypes, Kendrick is the more religious man because he's a straight male, and I guess the idea of that religion isn't based on how you like what you're attracted to or how you view the world. It's more on like how you practice the religion and how you feel about Christ, and or whatever religion you practice. It's not based on your I guess orientation in a way. And I felt like that track was very powerful in displaying that message. So that's the use of words is very important, and how you come across to other people is also very important.
Yeah, trailing off that, Kendrick also ends Anti-Diaries with a fairly recent event where he brought a fan on stage, and how he was and he goes into talking about how she couldn't say a word because there's more meaning to a word than just the letters they are, the symbols they are. So that just goes into how words are more than just letters, and there's many implications to certain words and how people perceive them. And a lot of the story itself also talks about how language is subjective in many ways, as Atwood talks about the word beautiful, and beautiful to one person might be is different for everybody. And in this article or story, Atwood says women these days have to deal with too many intimidating physical role models as it is. What with those bimbos in the ads, and the word bimbos itself has a negative connotation, but she decides to use it anyways because it goes to show that the word beautiful has a certain effect on self-perception for many people, and that can affect people in very negative ways, especially when they consider themselves not beautiful, and especially when society considers them to be not beautiful. But beautiful itself is very subjective, so I would really want to strike down the connotation of beautiful or ugly and all those other categorization terms.
So yeah, kind of going off what Aditya just said is the talk of the words is there's really description is needed in literature, and in this piece it's really saying that this description, there's no really, the way I see it, there's no really perfect way to describe instances. Like, he calls her beautiful, and then Margaret Atwood calls her beautiful. We don't really know who this speaker is, but then it goes to say, it changes the description to a little overweight and whose front teeth stuck out. And that just shows, and then
In a way, that's like more offensive.
yeah. So there's no really correct way to describe somebody that will make it not offensive. So that's kind of the part that the language in this story, I feel, is like highlighted, and that's kind of what I took from the changing language.
Yeah. So like summarizing, I think like Josh said, and everybody said, like the writer Margaret Atwood, or the speaker in here, like tries to use political correctness and fix the language that they use, but instead she's also putting in her own stereotypes and making another like an offensive comment or politically incorrect languages. So more importantly, it's more the language, more than the language you use, it's more important to like convey the message and like share ideas. You shouldn't be limiting those sharing of ideas by limiting the word choices we have.
Well said. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's podcast. Thanks for tuning in. That's all I got to say.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Banging boys out. That was
Banging boys out.
No mercy.
Booyah!
No mercy.